You think your $750 credit score makes you safe? Think again. Last month, a 34-year-old named Marcus applied for a car loan. His FICO score was 752. Excellent credit, zero missed payments, low debt-to-income ratio. He should have been approved instantly with the best interest rate available. Instead, he got rejected. No explanation, just a letter saying his application didn't meet their lending criteria. Marcus spent 3 days calling the bank trying to figure out what went wrong. Finally, a loan officer told him, off the record, it wasn't his FICO score that killed his application, it was his shadow score. This video is about the credit score you've never seen, the one that's being calculated right now based on how often you return Amazon packages, whether you use buy now, pay later apps, and even how frequently you check your bank balance. It's called alternative data scoring, and in 2026, it matters more than your actual credit score. If you've ever been denied for something you should have qualified for, this is probably why. Let's start with what nobody explains clearly. Your FICO score is the number you see on Credit Karma. It's based on 5 things: payment history, credit utilization, length of credit history, credit mix, new credit inquiries. That's it. Those 5 factors produce a number between 300 and 850, and that number has been the standard for decades. But here's what changed. Starting around 2020 and accelerating dramatically through 2024 and 2025, data firms started building a second scoring system. They call it alternative data. The financial industry calls it supplemental risk assessment. Everyone else calls it your shadow score because you can't see it and you can't control it, and most people don't even know it exists. The shadow score tracks everything your FICO score doesn't. How often you return purchases, whether you've used buy now, pay later services like Affirm or Klarna or Afterpay, how your utility bills fluctuate month to month, whether you overdraft your checking account, how often you open your banking app, whether you've moved recently, whether you've changed jobs, whether you Google things like how to negotiate credit card debt or bankruptcy attorney near me. All of this is being tracked, aggregated, and sold to lenders by companies most people have never heard of. The biggest player in this space is LexisNexis Risk Solutions. They run something called RiskView, which combines credit data with what they call alternative attributes. Translation, they're tracking non-financial behaviors and using them to predict whether you'll pay back a loan even if you've never missed a payment in your life. Another major player is CoreLogic. They track rental payment history, which sounds reasonable until you realize they're also tracking eviction filings, even if those evictions were dismissed or you won before it went to court. FICO itself launched something called FICO Score XD, which uses utility payments and telecommunications data to score people with thin credit files. Experian has Experian Boost, which lets you add utility and phone bills to your credit report voluntarily, but they're also tracking that data whether you opt in or not. Here's why this matters and why it's fundamentally different from your regular credit score. Your FICO score is backward-looking. It tells lenders what you did in the past, paid on time or didn't, kept balances low or didn't. The shadow score is forward-looking. It's predictive. It uses AI and machine learning to analyze patterns in your behavior and predict whether you're likely to default in the future, even if you've never missed a payment in your life. Let's talk about the specific data points that are hurting people right now. First, e-commerce return rates. If you buy clothes online and return half of what you order, that's being flagged as indecisiveness or buyer's remorse or potential fraud risk. Retailers share this data with credit bureaus and data aggregators. High return rates signal to lenders that you might be financially unstable or making impulsive decisions. It doesn't matter that you're just trying to find clothes that fit. The algorithm sees high returns and flags you as higher risk. Second, buy now, pay later usage. This one is brutal. Services like Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay, and Sezzle marketed themselves as alternatives to credit cards. No interest if you pay on time, split your purchase into 4 easy payments. Sounds great, except every time you use these services, it's being reported to data firms and it's hurting you. Why? Because lenders view BNPL as a sign that you don't have enough cash flow to make normal purchases. If you need to split a $200 purchase into 4 payments, that signals to them that you're living paycheck to paycheck. Even if you pay on time every time, the fact that you're using these services at all is a red flag in the shadow scoring system. Third, utility payment volatility. Companies like LexisNexis are buying utility payment data from power companies and water companies. If your electricity bill spikes one month, that can signal financial distress before you ever miss a payment on anything. The algorithm assumes that if your bills are volatile, you might be struggling with money management. It doesn't matter that you had guests staying with you or that you ran the AC more during a heat wave. The pattern triggers the risk flag. Fourth, banking app usage frequency. This one sounds insane, but it's real. Some lenders are using app engagement data as a proxy for financial anxiety. If you're checking your bank balance multiple times per day, every day, the algorithm interprets that as someone who's worried about money. If you rarely check it, that can signal confidence or avoidance depending on other factors. The point is, your behavior inside your banking app is being monitored and scored. Fifth, search history and browsing behavior. This one gets genuinely creepy. Data brokers buy search and browsing data from ad networks and internet service providers. If you've Googled terms like debt consolidation, or how to stop creditors from calling, or can I get a loan with bad credit, that data is being packaged and sold to lenders. Lenders can buy access to this behavioral data before you even apply. Here's the part that makes this system so dangerous. You can't see your shadow score. There's no website where you can check it. There's no federal law that requires these companies to show you what data they have on you or how they're scoring you. The Fair Credit Reporting Act covers traditional credit bureaus, but most of these alternative data firms operate in a legal gray area. They argue they're not credit reporting agencies because they don't provide credit reports. They provide risk assessment tools. That distinction lets them avoid the disclosure requirements that apply to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Marcus eventually figured out what killed his car loan application. He'd used Affirm 6 times in the previous year to split purchases, all paid on time. But the lender's underwriting model flagged repeated BNPL usage as high risk. His 752 FICO score didn't matter. The shadow score said he was living beyond his means. Application denied. So what do you actually do about this? You can't opt out of shadow scoring because you don't even know who has your data or what they're tracking, but you can minimize the behaviors that trigger red flags. Stop using buy now, pay later services completely. If you can't afford to pay for something in full right now, don't buy it. Every BNPL transaction is potentially hurting your shadow score. Reduce your e-commerce return rate. Be more selective about what you order online. If you're ordering 3 sizes of the same item intending to return 2, you're creating a return pattern that looks like financial instability to the algorithm. Stabilize your utility payments. If possible, set your utility bills to auto-pay from your checking account so you never miss a payment and your payment history looks perfect. If your bills fluctuate a lot, consider budget billing programs that smooth out the monthly amount so there's no volatility for the algorithm to flag. Monitor your checking account for overdrafts. Even one overdraft can create a shadow score red flag because it signals you're cutting it close on cash flow. Set up low balance alerts so you never overdraft accidentally. Be careful what you Google. If you're researching financial topics, use private browsing or a VPN. Data brokers are less likely to associate that search behavior with your identity if you're not logged in to Google or browsing in incognito mode. It's not perfect, but it reduces the data trail. Limit how often you use your banking app. This one is tricky because you want to stay on top of your finances, but you also don't want to create a pattern that looks like financial anxiety. Check your accounts regularly, but not obsessively. Once a day is probably fine. 5 times a day looks like panic. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The shadow scoring system exists because traditional credit scores have limitations. Millions of people have thin credit files or no credit history at all. Lenders wanted a way to assess risk for those borrowers, and alternative data was supposed to be the solution. But what started as a tool to include more people in the credit system has become a surveillance mechanism that punishes normal behavior. You shouldn't be penalized for returning clothes that don't fit. You shouldn't be punished for using a payment service that the retailer actively promotes at checkout. But you are. The system doesn't care about context, it just sees patterns and makes predictions. The reason you haven't heard about this from financial advisors or credit counselors is simple. Most of them don't know how deep the alternative data tracking goes. They're still operating on FICO fundamentals. Pay your bills on time, keep your balances low, don't open too many accounts at once. That advice is still true, but it's not the complete picture anymore. You can do everything right by traditional credit standards and still get denied because your shadow score flagged you as risky. This system is expanding. More data is being integrated every year. LexisNexis already pulls from over 10,000 data sources. They have information on 290 million U.S. consumers. That's basically every adult in the country. And they're not the only ones. There are dozens of firms building shadow scoring models. Some focus on rental history, some focus on employment stability, some focus on social media behavior. Yes, social media. If you post about financial stress or job loss or major life changes, that data is being harvested and potentially used against you in lending decisions. The financial industry will tell you this is about inclusion and expanding credit access to underserved populations. But if that were true, these scores would help people. Instead, they're being used to justify higher interest rates and denials for borrowers who would have qualified under traditional standards. The system has been turned into a tool for risk avoidance and profit maximization. Banks don't want to lend to anyone who shows even a hint of potential future risk, so they buy every piece of behavioral data they can find and feed it into predictive models that are biased toward denial. Marcus eventually got his car loan from a credit union that didn't use alternative data scoring. He had to shop around and specifically ask lenders whether they used supplemental risk assessment tools. Most wouldn't give him a straight answer. One finally admitted they only used traditional credit bureau data. He applied there and got approved instantly. Same 752 FICO score, no shadow score, no problem. If you're applying for a loan or a credit card and you get denied despite having good credit, ask the lender specifically if they use alternative data or supplemental risk assessment in their underwriting. They're required to tell you if you ask directly. If they say yes, ask what data points flagged your application. They might not give you details, but it's worth asking. Sometimes just knowing that BNPL usage was the issue can help you fix it before the next application. The system is designed to be invisible. That's the point. If borrowers knew they were being scored on their Amazon returns or their utility bills, they'd change their behavior or push back against the system. So the scoring happens behind closed doors, using data you didn't know was being collected and models you can't see or challenge. It's functionally a social credit system, but instead of being run by the government, it's run by private companies selling risk scores to banks. Your 750 FICO score means you've been financially responsible by traditional measures, but in 2026, that's not enough. You also need to be aware that every digital transaction, every online purchase, every utility payment, and every search query is potentially being fed into a shadow scoring system that can override your actual credit history. That's the new reality of consumer lending. Traditional credit scores still matter, but they're no longer the only thing that matters. The question is whether you're going to let this system operate in the shadows or whether you're going to adjust your behavior now that you know it exists. You can't opt out, but you can make yourself less vulnerable. Stop using BNPL, reduce your return rates, stabilize your bills, limit your banking app obsession, Google your financial questions in private mode. These are small behavioral changes that reduce your shadow score risk profile. Marcus knows now. He stopped using Affirm. He hasn't used any BNPL service in 4 months. His shadow score is probably improving, though he'll never actually see the number. But when he applies for a mortgage next year, he won't have a file full of BNPL red flags dragging down his application. That's the best you can do in a system designed to track you without your knowledge. Minimize the data trail, reduce the risk flags, operate like someone is always watching, because someone is. Important disclaimer: the alternative data scoring systems described in this video are real, but the specific algorithms and weights used by individual lenders are proprietary and not publicly disclosed. The behavioral recommendations are based on industry reporting and data privacy advocacy research. This is educational content, not legal or financial advice. Consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions.